For some time now, all of you out there, you know that I've been talking about the subject of 5G, and it's something that really is set to impact all of us. There's a lot of talk out there on the internet right now, and as you know, I always like to try and bring the very best researchers for specific topics, and tonight certainly is no different there. In fact, I think I've got the very, very best, and we're going to go even deeper into the topic of 5G and take our understanding of all of this even further. And I've said for a long time that 5G, it's not so much for us per se, but when you look at it, it's all about the machines. Now, in addition to this, the surveillance capabilities, I think you'll all agree, are mind-boggling. But when I say that 5G is not for us, well, that isn't exactly true, because the 5G world may not be welcoming and conducive to humans in our current form, but it's going to signal the push and a transformation to or alteration of what it means to even be human. 5G, in my opinion, and after we speak to our special guest tonight, is a huge part in a push to upgrade us towards human 2.0. So to help me go over all of this 5G technology and how it fits into other topics that we've spoke about in the past before, let me welcome back to the show, you guessed it, it's Ilana Freeland. And Ilana is a writer, a ghostwriter, speaker, storyteller, and teacher who researches and writes on deep state issues, including the stories of survivors of MKUltra, ritual abuse, and invasive electromagnetic weapons, including that's in Nexus magazine, October 2014. Now, she's best known for her work on chemtrails, HAARP, and the full spectrum dominance of the planet, and that was published by Feral House back in 2014. Time surely is flying. And Under an Ionized Sky, from chemtrails to the space fence lockdown, also again from Feral House Publishing, and that came out at this time last year. And she's here with us tonight. Ilana, welcome back to the Kev Baker Show. And if you can, just click on your camera at your end on the Skype.
All right. Yes, the camera.
There we go. There we go. We're back. See, just like that, I've managed to tame the technology and you're here with us live. But Ilana, 5G, like I say, this is an important topic that is set to affect all of us, and it's something that you've been looking into. It fits in with a lot of your other research, and it's something we're going to get deeper into tonight. But before I get there, just before the show, I was sharing with you how so many of the listeners here to the Kev Baker Show have got in touch with me. They've reached out, and they've been mentioning what I'm calling out of whackness, or their equilibrium just isn't right. Something isn't feeling right. Confusion, memory's a bit gone. And I was asking you just kind of off the cuff before we came on air if it's something you'd come across. And it certainly is, isn't it?
Yes. And Kev, you said that are these people Glasgow people? Because
no,
you said that you're all hooked up.
Yeah, we're all hooked up over here, but I find it's America. I've had a couple of people in Australia as well. So Canada too. It's all round really, Ilana. Here, right. Personally, as I was saying to you kind of jokingly, I mean, we don't even notice the 5G being on because everyone was crazy before they flicked the switch anyway.
Right, right. And I think where we need to start in order to understand how space-time is being influenced by the weaponizing of the entire environment, all of the natural environment is being weaponized. We need to understand that nanoparticle part of it, because that's crucial to how this human 2.0 is going to be created through the environment. I wrote those books about chemtrails, about the HAARP and other ionospheric heaters, about the space fence that's run by Lockheed Martin. And what's crucial to the issue of 5G and 5G's relationship with what is being called the Internet of Things, which is all the computerized technology now that it can be accessed through the internet is that the nanoparticles in the jet fuel and the fumes coming out of the combustion chamber, the sensors, the trillions and trillions of sensors that have been released in near Earth orbit in order to supposedly bring in data from the environment up there. And then some of those sensors end up rotating around the planet along with the conductive heavy metal nanoparticles that are also spewing from the backs of rockets going up into near Earth orbit. And many of those ending up as what I'm calling a Saturn ring around the planet, around the equator. Down here, when the sensors fall and the heavy metals that are conductive nanos fall, we are breathing them in, and they are settling on our skin, on the earth, on everything. A lot of people now are talking about the fibers that they're finding in their homes, in the dust. And of course, much of that dust now is smart dust and is a transceiver communicating with usually, to my mind, fusion centers, we call them here in the States. But also it could be military bases, the laptop boys that are a lot of data is pouring in through the AI system that is interwoven with the Internet of Things. And all around us are these nanoparticles, but they're not just around us, right? They're inside us. And because they're nanoscale and 1 nano equals 1 billionth of a meter, because of the nanoparticles, tiny size, they apparently, according to scientists, do not really obey natural laws. They have a swarm consciousness. Yes, it's as though they're alive, and they are also engineered. And part of them is probably, in some cases, much like Morgellons, or as Clifford Carnicom calls it, the cross-domain bacteria. Most of them, I mean, many of the nanoparticles are probably half organic, half inorganic. Many are inorganic. Doesn't seem to matter, because they create this swarm consciousness that then can be manipulated with radio waves and microwaves. So this is all around us, and it's in us, and they are easily trespassing over the blood-brain barrier because of their tininess. And so this is the first thing we need to realize. And if people think that I'm dramatizing too much about how crucial the nanotechnology is, I hope for those people who have access to Facebook that you can check out the work, endless work actually, of Pete Ramon, Ramon. Pete supplies me with more than I can possibly read about nanotechnology, and really understand it. Because if I were to keynote the most important thing now that I understand is going to connect us with what is being delivered by the trails, jet and rocket and drone, and delivered and supported by GMO foods and piggybacked into incredible vaccine programs. These 3 delivery systems are the primaries. And of course, the first one is aerial. It's coming through the air. And then it's coming through the food. And then it's coming through I think you call them jabs over there in England and Scotland. Cool. So
I was watching
So,
my old army training base the other day on YouTube. I found a video, and I often talked about how we were like treated like pin cushions, Ilana. We really were, because it was just a barrage of vaccines, and they actually showed you it in the training video. And that's when it really came back to me just how many vaccinations we were given then. And an absolute guinea pig. That's what I said to my partner at the time we were watching it. And a lot of the soldiers, be it America, be it in the UK, all over the EU, used as basically test subjects for a lot of the concoctions that now people are getting injected into them. How many did you get at birth now? Maybe 20 odd injections, 20 plus?
20, yeah, 27. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because there has been it's as though there's a spectrum. At first, MK Ultra is very similar to this, initially using soldiers as guinea pigs and the soldiers' children. Once they realized that the MK Ultra, the mind control, programming through mainly drugs, hypnosis, and pain induction would have to begin in childhood in order to actually stick, and in order to actually produce in one person several functionaries that they could use for spying, for drug muling, assassinations, etc. They used soldiers and mainly officers, actually, looking for a certain intelligence quotient. They used those children first. Then they used the satanic cults children, because those children had been programmed from even before birth. And then it moved on into other people. There were professors who were being programmed as adults, and they began to throw a lot of weight behind adult programming. But eventually, what we see is this spectrum all the way from using military subjects without their knowledge to now civilians. And that is exactly what is going on, because these are very large scale experiments and testing. And it's not just experiments and testing anymore, though. For the geoengineering piece of the delivery system, that's been 2 decades at the very least. And now it's more, they have a lot of backlog now of experiments that have been successful, been unsuccessful. They've done a lot of hurricanes. They've done a lot of the weather experimentation. And also the Morgellons experimentation has been going on 2 decades. So now we have, yes, continuing experiments. Like this year in the weather department, it appeared to be, again, the polar cold being brought down and moved in different places, etc.
That's the new norm now,
Yolana,
isn't it? The polar vortex.
Say it again.
The polar vortex is like our new norm.
Yes. We here where I live, where we rarely have snow, we had it piled up and incredible sub-zero temperatures. It was quite remarkable. So anyway, just to make clear that yes, the spectrum of experimentation through the geoengineering is much broader than just weather. It is, there are many things going on, and the 5G is now like the linchpin of an entire system is being brought in. And everything is ionized now. The atmosphere is constantly ionized. It's as though we live in a mini ionosphere. And the 5G piece will be communicating through the Internet of Things. Yes, that's true. But it will also have the capability of communicating with the nanoparticles inside our bodies and brains. And if people are feeling spacey, having memory problems, having as though the environment around them has shifted so that you were mentioning equilibrium problems. This is all understandable because the environment now is the matrix being used to first of all tamper with the environment in our geographic area, and we all live in geomagnetic fields, and then there are the electromagnetic fields that are being created by all of the equipment we have around us, in our homes, in our neighborhoods, even rurally now. And then I haven't even talked about the satellites that are above us.
It's a major
Because
component that I don't think people really appreciate, because so much time is spent talking about how the transmitter receivers will be closely spaced together and it's very kind of line of sight, but it's almost as if the satellite component is it's been elusive to most people. It's been evaded, really, and that's a huge part to this.
yes, what it does is, this is the space fence. You see, the space fence is not just, if you listen to Lockheed Martin promos, they'll make it sound like it's just a couple, 3 installations. And I spend the entire Under an Ionized Sky book explaining that the space fence, and thanks to Billy Hayes, by the way, the HARP man that has been so helpful to me, I explain how the space fence is really, it's the particles above us in near Earth orbit, and then there's that, and those are being pumped in by rockets very frequently now. Many rockets are heading skyward, and they're not going up into outer space. I don't know, it's not Flash Gordon. It's that they're on a parabola. They're going up and they're coming back down. They're going up to test the above, the troposphere and the atmospheres above, but they're also distributing a lot of nanoparticles, including sensors, including microprocessors, including biologicals, fungi, who knows what.
Ilana, I think that's led to a lot of the videos and a lot of confusion when we see some of the rocket launches and they have this spectacular light show and they all seem different from one another. I mean, for me, that's a part of the concoction that they're spraying on the way up.
Yes, those are chemical signatures, absolutely. And they're all sort of tangled together and very, very pretty and strange, and not informing the public of any of this, of course. So, but my point is, we're sandwiched between what is being delivered down here and the radio frequency microwave installations that are part of the infrastructure of the ground-based space fence mechanism. And then we have above us the above Earth mechanism, including the satellites. And now we're sort of in between. And because we're resonant beings and we resonate easily to manipulation of frequencies around us, can you see what they can do in an area if they choose to target just one area at a time? I mean, first of all, this is global, but they can target things by using what's called interferometry, and this is all scalar technology, where they can actually get 2 ionospheric heaters to shoot out beams. They could use lasers for smaller areas, but finally those beams will cross, and at the crosshairs of that beam, that will be the target area. And so, just as we watched 9/11 and watched to my mind, this is how I feel, and I would say that Judy Wood had a very big impact on me with her book, Where Did the Towers Go?
Well, I'm with you on this one. I concur with you and Judy on this one.
Yes. And so just as there we saw towers literally molecular disintegrate, like down in a few seconds, boom. This is not just a weapon being used to destroy on a molecular level. This is influence. This is resonance that has to do with affecting an entire population, an entire area. We've heard about the birds dropping from the sky and the whales beaching themselves and all these things going on. This can be moved around as they try different areas, but the point is that we're sandwiched between in the space fence mechanism, and therefore this is why I call it lockdown. And so when I had an experience, and let me tell everybody about it.
Let's just hold that thought, because we're almost going to the break, and I don't want you to get cut off, so I don't want you to be halfway through your story. But Ilana, it's almost as if now we've moved from one phase into another, because we had the chemtrailing, we've had all the testing of the vaccines, which is ongoing, but it's almost now as if with the implementation of 5G, everything is wired and ready to go, from the environment to us.
Yes, and they had to spend a long time on the weather part, and not just because they wanted to control the weather, which to me, there is no uncontrolled weather now.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll be right back.
All right.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
You're tuned in to today's Kev Baker Show, and my special guest is Ilana Freeland. Now, we've been talking about 5G, the space fence, geoengineering, a whole host of topics, and if you're just joining the show, please try and catch that over in the archive, because some really important information on there. And before we went to the break, Ilana was just about to share a personal story that ties in with all of this, and I didn't want to get it cut off before we went there. So Ilana, I want to come straight back to you, because I'm really interested to hear this story. We were just about to get into it before we went on the show, and then we had to go on air, and then we were just about to get into it there before the break. So don't keep me waiting any longer. What's been going on, Ilana?
All right. So I live in a town that it seems to me that most people are probably being pulsed with frequencies for complacency and Democratic Party nonsense and Trump hate and that sort of thing. It's a state capital, and it's really there's no one I can talk to. I've been pretty much blacklisted. So there's this little bar. It's a very tiny little wine bar, kind of posh, a little bit, not totally, but very few people go in there, and there's usually a nice conversation around the bar by people who are having good wine, who know good wine. I actually don't know good wine. I just know one wine I like to have a glass of maybe once every couple of weeks. So I was in this bar, and then I was getting ready to leave. I'd been there about an hour. And then I noticed a young woman sitting at the end of the bar. There were only about 4 people at the bar, and then the bartender. And she had her nose in a book, and she had shut it now. And so I said to her, "What book are you reading?" And she said, "Oh, I'm reading Michelle." And I said, "Michelle?" And she said, "Oh yeah, Michelle Obama's autobiography." And okay, so that's what she'd been reading. I immediately, because I write people's books for them, I immediately thought that Michelle probably had several ghostwriters. I ghostwrite from time to time. And I also was thinking that there are probably a lot of lies in that book. But what happened then was very strange. It was as though the other people, there were about 3 other people, they started, "Oh yes, and I really miss Obama, and weren't they wonderful?" But it wasn't what they were saying so much as how they were saying it, and I realized that it was like some sort of programming. It was not. It was rote. It was as if they were reciting lines. And then I noticed that the entire atmosphere of the bar had shifted, and I felt like I was underwater. I felt like I mean I could breathe, but I felt like something had just closed over me, and I knew it had to do with what these people were saying, or how they were saying it, and so I stood up, not wanting it to affect me any further than it had, and I put my coat on and I kind of cruised over to the door and raised my hand and said, "Good night, everybody." And I went outside, and I was so upset. And I'm not a particularly emotional person. I have deep feelings, and sometimes they'll come up and surprise me. And in this case, I was quite upset because I realized I had just witnessed a small scene of the frequency pulsing that I keep telling people about, and that I had seen it up close and personal. And it was like, yes, zombie. I mean, I can't, I'm not using that term lightly. I don't really use that term, but in this case, oh yeah, this was zombie stuff. So I'm saying, telling the story because it may be that as space time is being shifted, because they are shifting our magnetosphere, they're shifting our ionosphere. The entire Earth now is coated in an atmosphere that has been ionized and is impregnated by we don't know what. And now comes the 5G, which will be able to move on another more subtle scale than the radio waves and microwaves have been able to move on. So I wanted to share that story.
No, I think this is going to become more commonplace, and I'm predicting I'm probably getting a couple of emails from people who have had similar situations where things have just been off. And the thing is, a lot of people talking about Mandela effects in recent years, and I think this is all part of the same thing, because whether we're changing timelines or our perception of things, of reality, has been changed, I think it could tie into what we're talking about here.
Yes, and I've been reviewing a lot of things because I'm writing a third book. And Clifford Carnicom did some time experiments and documented them back in 2005. And at that time, he was looking at milliseconds and seconds, that the time was shifting on the planet. And of course, now we're hearing about how the magnetic north is shifting ever further northeast. At this point, it appears to be over, I can't remember.
Siberia, I think, Siberia.
Siberia.
Yeah, that's where it's on its way. And it's speeding up every year, like you say.
Yeah, yeah, and this is all part of the space program, the secret space program that investment analyst Catherine Austin Fitts has been discussing for a few years now. And we have to understand that it's not something happening just out there, but that it is it's enveloping us, because we are sandwiched between the effects going on in near Earth orbit and the effects going on here on the ground. So yes, space-time is being adjusted and changed. And now let's look at another part of this before we look at the transhumanist part
Absolutely.
of the 5G. I follow Jamie Lee and his plaintruth.info videos pretty closely. Jamie and I are in touch. He sends me things. And recently he did a whole series on the Paradise, California fires. And I can't remember how many videos he's done. I think it's close to 100. But the Paradise Lost number 51 is very interesting. He's interviewing an anonymous scientist who seemed to know quite a bit, had worked for some of the military contractor, the big corporations, and NASA, and was he was running down how he saw the fires of having started. And one of the things he said at the very get-go is he said there were multiple deployments going on of various elements, and that would be chemical and frequencies. And he said, and I immediately began to study it. He said that they had used the beam coming. Many people on their cell phone cameras caught a blue beam coming down from the sky, and much discussion followed that this was a laser, and was this the weapon, or was this the triggering agent? What was it? And he claims that it was Li-Fi, and Li-Fi is being sold as a very small mechanism by which you can have Wi-Fi in your home without the wireless technology. You can actually use light. And he said that this Li-Fi really triggered the LEDs in the area. Now I don't know how it is in Europe, but they're putting up LEDs along our freeways, and that is the lighting system, and all the restaurants and the coding for neighborhood homes is all including LEDs now. Those are light emitting diodes.
Yeah, that's the way that smart cities like to go as well.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is because they're everywhere. They're part of the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Things is very, very broad. But he says that the biggest thing that happened that you can see in the films, but you don't necessarily know what you're looking at, the films of the fires, is I noticed it right away, and again, it made me think of Where Did the Towers Go by Judy Wood. You'll see it's as if embers, ignited embers, are crawling across the ground in a swarm. And I noticed it because I'm aware of nanotechnology being swarm-like. That isn't really, I mean, even though bees swarm, wasps swarm, there are creatures that swarm, and buffaloes travel in a herd and that sort of thing. But the nanotechnology swarms, I had not known that they could actually crawl over the ground. And the reason they can, said this scientist on Jamie's show, is because they're in the earth. And all they need is to be activated. And so you see these embers swarming across the floor of Paradise, California, while everything's burning, is that it's nanotechnology. And this was a real wake-up call for me, because I had not realized that this would be how they could do what I've been calling terraforming, or the planetary operations that are going on. So
I've just dropped a picture in with you there. I've just dropped a picture in the chat for you there,
yes.
Ilana.
Okay.
And it's just for the listeners out there who might sound science fiction at times, the kind of stuff that myself and Ilana talk about. But if you just want to even head over to Google when you get a chance, and you can just type in, it's simple, nanotech swarm, and you can see nanotechnology moving across a table. So it's absolutely capable of doing exactly what you're saying here, Ilana, just to back you up on what you're saying. Because that's why I like working with you, because we kind of get into the science. A lot of times science is theoretical, but the stuff that you're covering here and ties in with this, it's nuts and bolts. We can actually show examples of what you're talking about.
Yes. So for me, there were two interesting ideas on that show that this scientist contributed to our conversation going on about how this technology works and what we're going to do about it, how we're going to meet the challenges of this era. One that the Li-Fi is involved in activating the LEDs in the area, in the houses, in the on the freeways and street lights, in order to ignite the fire, utilizing the Internet of Things to draw energy from the Internet of Things, and then have a triggering agent, which in this case he claims is the Li-Fi. The Li-Fi, if you read about it, it can be very much. I was going to read something to you, but I don't know how that's the trouble with, they want you to sign up for new Skype, and then you have to spend like a lot of time learning how it even works.
I know. It's one of the few programs I know that instead of going forward, it goes backwards every update that they do. It's a bit like NASA. If NASA worked Skype, it would make sense.
Yeah. And I wanted to just read some about it. Now, Kev, if I put you on...
If you minimize, you can do whatever you like to your Skype. You don't worry about that. I've still got you here at this end. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, well, if I knew what to do, I'd be in good shape here. See? All right, so I'll just fly by the seat of my pants. Because the other part of the California story that I wanted to cover is the LiDAR. And LiDAR is basically laser radar. Light radar. And LiDAR is used... it's used in space, it's in near Earth orbit, it's used in our atmosphere to gather measurements, to tomographically, it can penetrate the Earth to read different metal signatures and quantities and all sorts of things. That's LiDAR. And Deborah Tavares called me the other day and told me that she had been at a meeting, a city sort of meeting. Californians are having a lot of meetings because citizens are very, very concerned about all the things going on down there. And I want everybody to know that California is used as a laboratory, and has for decades. And on the East Coast, it would be New York. So she said that at the meeting, there were UN representatives there, and the pictures were shown on probably from a PowerPoint, showing that LiDAR instruments were now going to be placed on the mountains and hills around Paradise and in that area of California, Northern California. And Deborah was very upset, thinking that this was going to be used as a weapon. So I called Christopher Fontenot, and he's one of my science guys, wonderful electric universe advocate, and asked him about the LiDAR and what the uses were, because I know that it does measurement, but what else does it do? Well, he mentioned that back in the Cold War, the Soviets had initially used it as a psychotronic weapon that could actually affect people's minds. And so Chris didn't think that would be what they would be doing there. But again, we're back at the technology, and this is true of all these technologies. That's the LEDs, the Li-Fi, LiDAR. All of these technologies are what the military likes to call dual use. And I talk extensively about dual use in this last book. What dual use is it's a civilian and military technology, and it, depending on who's using it for what, it is completely either. So I'm going to be watching, as is Deborah, to see exactly what these LiDAR units are up to it's surrounding this area. Of course, they say that it's to measure the rainfall, measure the dryness, the low pressure, high pressure zones, just to keep track because, gosh, this fire just came out of nowhere and nobody knows how that happened, that sort of thing. And now I'm wondering if it's going to be used psychotronically, maybe laying some chemtrails of lithium over the area and then hitting it with some radar or some sort of radio frequency waves or whatever. And then, people go into fog and la la land like I did the other night when I literally felt like I was underwater.
Yeah, and of course the rockets come into that again, Ilana, because we've had NASA in the past launching rockets with lithium out of them, the lithium chemtrails. So this is all very real science. And probably, when you've got a local population, and I was lucky enough to have Deborah on the show here, but when you've got a local population that are fighting back, from the controller's point of view, this is the best way to, kind of subdue any activism.
Yeah, and we did, just so you know, back in 2015, we had that happen. Lithium was laid over the coastline of Oregon. And the reason we know that is because a whistleblower from the weather department in the state of Oregon contacted 3 of our activists in the anti-geoengineering movement and explained how the coastal towns of Oregon were being used for experimentation and that lithium was being laid over them. So Ann Fillmore wrote a wonderful paper on that can people can find on the internet if they look for Ann Fillmore, Fillmore, and lithium over Oregon. So yes, they are experimenting with many, many things. It's hard to keep track of it all. In fact, I'm sure I can't keep track of it all, though some people seem to think I can. I'm now concentrating on the synthetic biology part. So if we want, we can go into more about the 5G. But let's just consider what I've said so far, that it is literally it is the environment that is being used to move us toward transhumanism. This we can count on. And one of the first signs of that was long ago when Clifford Carnicom was collecting data from his HEPA filter and precipitation over northern New Mexico in order to isolate the fibers and take a good look at them with the equipment he had. And that was when he and I met up, he was doing that. And of course, I've told the story many times that I saw the fibers in my eating the iron, sucking the iron out of my red blood cells under Clifford's microscope. And this definitely got my attention. So that was one of the first things, is pathogens, but not just pathogens. It's also the nanotechnology, including the heavy metals, including the sensors, including other very tiny instruments that they are using in order to command and control the environment on a micro scale. That's important to know. This is a very clandestine national security program that we are not being told about, and that is enriching, as we're all guinea pigs, it's enriching the pharmaceutical and medical industries, while the military industrial intelligence complex collects data in order to understand how full spectrum dominance over the planet Earth and its beings can be maintained. I think we can admit that now full spectrum control, the control factor of what they set out to do decades ago, is they're doing very well, because people are so clueless and incapable now from years of television and alpha wave uh, nonsense and just bad programming, and now the cell phones and the towers surrounding us, et cetera. We are putty in their hands, and though people at a moment, I'm sure you know this, Kev, we can get on here and talk, and people will become very aware while I'm talking and giving information. But then when I go away, very little remains, and the time commitment and the energy commitment and the knowledge commitment dwindle. And that's why people love to watch videos, but don't really read. And I just remembered that person's question. Which to read in which order?
Yeah, that's from our good friend.
Chemtrails.
That's from our good friend Nancy in the chat room. Yes, she was really wondering what is the best order to approach your books.
Yes, the two books are quite different. The first one, the 2014 one, Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, I wrote that book to basically lay down everything we knew at that point that I could become aware of. I spent 2 years researching it, and it has, I think, about 600 footnotes. And I was absolutely surprised that there are many military papers, many patents, everything's in open source. It's just that nobody knows how to contextualize it. Nobody understands the science, so it's virtually hidden by our poor school system for the last 50 years. And that we've been in alpha wave watching TV and movies for so long that we really can't call on those beta waves to help us think. So that book is simply a kind of...
Join us after the break, folks. Don't go anywhere. Ilana Freeland is my very special guest today, and I have kidnapped her for extra time here. I thought I was only getting the pleasure of her company for 1 hour, but I have twisted her arm, and she's going to stay for all of you great people out there. And I'm looking at her website right now, folks. It's ilanafreeland.com. And of course, Ilana, you can get all your books there. Where's the best places for people to get the books? And we were rudely interrupted by the break when you were just explaining the best order to approach your books.
Yes, the books can be gotten on Amazon, or you can go to my site and it'll send you to Amazon anyway. And then, of course, Feral House, they have them. I wanted to say that I spend the first 100 pages of the second book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. Spend the first 100 pages catching everyone up over the last 4 years of geoengineering. So I think the strengths of the first book are the following. One, chapter 2, in which I deconstruct Bernard Eastland's 1987 patent for HARP, the High Frequency Active Aurora Research Project. And chapter 8, where I basically I will have gone through all of Clifford Carnicom's over 100 papers and sort of pulled out the essence of what he did. And, he was very grateful because so far, believe it or not, I'm the only person who has written on him and his work. of almost 20 years. It's really unbelievable that it's that sad. Um, and the other strength of the first book, the Chemtrails Heart book, is that I go through the hurricanes, the famous ones, Katrina, Sandy, the one down in Haiti, um, uh, Christchurch, New Zealand, and look at the possibilities that these were using the ionospheric heater, HARP, and another one or two for an interferometric weapon. And I'm pretty convinced that's exactly what happened. And Fukushima, of course, is in there as well. So those are the strengths of the first book. And the second book is basically looking at how you could set up an entire planetary infrastructure, which Lockheed Martin and other military contractors and telecom contractors and utility contractors have done. So that one goes into looking at all the parts that comprise Space Fence Lockdown beyond the Internet of Things. And the strengths of that book are that I contextualize all this military equipment on the planet now, all the bases, all the installations, and really see that there is a singular intent behind all of them for a lockdown on planet Earth in the context of a space age that is slowly being announced. Yeah.
Well, Ilana, I sometimes in more recent times have actually started or have dropped the term geoengineering because it's almost now as if we're entering, or what you could really wrap everything up under the umbrella of, is terraforming. And of course, this terraforming that's happening on planet Earth, like I said in opening, 5G, it's not very conducive to humans in our current form. And it's almost as if, along with the planet being changed, we ourselves are literally being changed. What it means to be human very soon, it's going to be something alien to what it was in the very near past. And this is part of your work now with this synthetic biology. I believe this is where this all ties in as well, right?
Yes, it is. And just to be clear, because you brought up something, let me remind people that I'm known for broadcasting a system of looking at the different military operations that come under the rubric of geoengineering, and terraforming is one of them. But let me just read those. There's 7 operations. This was Clifford Carnicom's work back in 2005 to come up with these, because a lot of people think it's just weather engineering, but it's not. It's much, much more. It's weather engineering, and then it's chemical electromagnetic engineering, which really at this point is very heavy on plasma experiments. And plasma is often said to be the 4th state of matter. But the truth is that plasma is closer to being the 1st state of matter. And I believe that the ionizing of the atmosphere has given them a huge laboratory in which to create plasma with these nanoparticles and ignite them into the gas fire plasma with radio frequency and microwaves.
Well, if I may ask you just before you go on with that list, there's a lot of these mystery booms being heard across America in particular. Would you speculate then that possibly that could be some kind of plasma activity, some experiment going on in the atmosphere, and that's why people are, it's something new, it's noises they haven't heard before?
I'd have to hear it to see, but no, generally speaking, those the sounds, the booms and the trumpet sounds and the scraping sounds and all that really have to do with the geomagnetic Earth being, tomography comes to mind, that it's being stimulated from above, and it's forced to make these sounds, these infrasound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
how I'd look at it. Say, okay, number 3, this is where we come to that terraforming you're talking about, Kev. Planetary geophysical operations. And this is the one that brings up the full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. In Joseph P. Farrell, in his book Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilizations, spells out Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev's 3 phases of technological achievement for any civilization aspiring to a space age. And that's what they're dragging us into, is a space age. The first phase of that, to succeed in a space age, is full spectrum dominance planetary control. And that's where we're at. We're right there. The second one is control over one's star. That's our sun. So right away, I think of the solar simulator, the sun simulator, and using the the so-called minimum for various purposes, because they're influencing the sun, Kev. That's part of the space-time thing going on. They are doing things to the sun. I don't have to import aliens for that. And then the third step is control over one's galaxy and its systems. So I believe that we're sort of headed in this direction, and that would come under planetary geophysical operations. The fourth operation is directed energy warfare operations, particle beams, etc., Star Wars stuff.
We're there.
And then we're there. The fifth one is surveillance and neural operations, and we're there.
Yep.
This is from space, and they would, again, be using the space fence infrastructure to control minds. Then the sixth one is the biological transhumanism operations, and this is the future, and this is the direction all of the previous are going. And the biological transhumanism includes turning us into a hive mind, so that we have a collective thinking that is sort of eavesdropping on each other, but it's sort of the same thinking capability. Nanoparticle delivery, other electro-optical technologies, remote genetic engineering of the DNA, remote, right? And this is where 5G comes in. This is it. Mitochondria, take away that protective mitochondria from the DNA, which is, of course, what 5G is so good at. And that would be Dr. Jack Kruse. I would recommend people read. Jack is pursuing this with a vengeance, Kruse. The remote genetic engineering of DNA, then replace nature with a virtual reality. And finally, the seventh operation, beyond the biological transhumanism, is the most enigmatic, which does sort of border on considering alien and UFO matters, is the detection and obscuration of exotic propulsion technology. And there is something hiding in the clouds and capable of making plasma cloud cover on its own. This is certain. Is it our technology, or is it from entities that can shapeshift and produce their own cover in our atmosphere? Our atmosphere is very juicy now. It's very juicy with radar and a lot going on with plasma. It would be very attractive to beings whose lowest physical body is plasma. And that's very possible. I don't see any. I don't see any woo-woo in that.
I think it's maybe a mixture of the two. There's bound to be our own exotic technology that we have that we don't know about, and these interdimensional, call them aliens, call them whatever you like. But I often say life doesn't have to take the form that we're in, and plasma, silicon, things we can't even imagine could host life. So I'm with you there all the way, Ilana.
Yes, and certainly the triangular ships that are often seen, and they're the most often seen in the cloud cover. Very interesting that you can produce such plasma cloud cover, and that's what it is. It's made out of plasma. It's not real moisture clouds. Those clouds are totally dry up there, other than, when here they've been showering us with lots of snow and rain and things that they're able to move off the South Pacific before they use it to tack it onto the jet stream and take it east for weather in the east. So you can see them. The triangular ships would be the Aurora, the TR-3B, and other things like that. Those are all ours. But then there are ships, whatever they are, that you can actually see plasma coming out of their exhaust as they create more cloud cover for themselves. And sure, we probably have that because they're very interested in looking at plasma as a fuel for probably interplanetary stuff. But I don't know. I don't know.
Exactly.
I have a wonderfully open mind, so I'm just sort of.
It's almost as if we're changing the planet for some other type of life form. And at the same time, we're going to have to be adapted as well because, like I said, it's not going to be conducive to humans in the form that we're in. You've mentioned the nanotechnology, and I know you're writing your latest book, I'm not sure if it's out yet, about this synthetic biology. Now, I talk about synths in the form of the robots that you see coming from Geordie Rose and Sanctuary AI. They're like synthetic robots, but synthetic biology, this is another ballgame altogether, isn't it?
But we've already begun it with the nanotech in us, because these are swarm beings, and what are they producing? Well, they're producing Elon Musk's neural net. It's in us. It's in us now. It's in everybody, and I know that's kind of scary, but
well, it's inevitable, isn't it? Because we all breathe the same air. I mean, so we've all been taking this in, and that's why we said earlier on, it's almost as if now we've got to the optimum level where we can be switched on, for lack of a better term, and it's almost as if we're being integrated into a virtual reality then.
That's exactly what's going to be next as far as experimentation goes, is starting to switch us on and off, and download into us when we sleep, which is when we're most vulnerable. What they've been doing to targeted individuals for, 50 years. The technology getting better and better. Now it's remote neural monitoring, and they're using people for those experiments to see just how to use us in a virtual way, because I've actually been thinking seriously about this, Kev, because yes, it's on synthetic biology, but like I write in the other books, it's going to be bigger than they keep trying to define it. They keep trying to compartmentalize it, separate from genetics, separate from environment, separate from even biology, or biology separate from biophysics. This divide and conquer thing. And I'm going to look at it through the lens of, a human 2.0. And when you say that they need another type of humanity, well, yeah, but they're going to do pretty well if they can just dumb us down and take over our minds for a slave class that doesn't even know it's enslaved, that has plenty of entertainment, and is cut off from nature, and is completely convinced that there are other species among us that will be superior to us, such as AIs. Because the AI is, yes, at this point, a machine. But as Geordie Rose said, I thought it was great. I love that. where he says, it's as though I'm standing at the altar of an alien god. But the D wave is just the beginning of another species. Yes, another species. But the thing is, the divine order is never taken into account in all these discussions. And there is a divine order. Yes, I know that just about everyone listening has never heard about it, because our masters for hundreds of years, if not thousands, have sought to make us think that everything is done materially here. And therefore, those who own the technology and the knowledge is power, will hold the day, and we might as well just lay down and die. But there's this divine component to the human being, a very unique component. No, we are not the highest ape. That is completely an abuse of Charles Darwin, and I assume he's flipping over in his grave again and again when he hears that. No, there's a lot more going on than we're being told. And so we need to really open our eyes and start taking care of ourselves in order to understand how these technologies work, so that our intelligence does not fall under the 5G that will be penetrating us with its millimeter waves, and wiping out our mitochondria, so that the DNA can be changed from remotely. I mean, this is their plan, the simple plan, and to the degree. I mean, I don't own a cell phone. That's not that makes me virtuous. It's simply I don't see any reason that I should own a military weapon. It's the same reason I've never owned a television. I mean, I have a computer. It dominates me enough. So we need to change our minds. I think it was it Einstein who said, you can't change something with this. You can't solve a problem with the same type of thinking that created the problem.
Exactly. That's why I always say it's insanity to expect politicians to actually sort out our political problems.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
That's not going to happen. Yeah, but we ourselves, I've said this many times, and people are probably, thinking I'm being obscure and mystical, but I'm not. We don't really know what would happen or what will happen if we all merge on a certain courageous frequency and sustain it at any cost. I mean, that's how I live. I'm not interested in indulging myself, other than, a glass of wine every couple of weeks, maybe. But I think it's time that we really looked at consciousness not as some lifestyle change, the lifestyle thing over here, but as the very core of our defense, and what kind of consciousness we would need in order to be within each other's sphere of influence. I mean, the space is not the problem. You don't need to be living next door to me. You need to have your thinking of a certain caliber and your attention more than anything. I always think of what Christ said, that, where your attention is, there lies your heart also. And I take that very seriously, and I think it's absolutely true. So I am the master of my attention, and so can everyone be. And I think that if I were to say what the defense system should be, it would be all the way from nuts and bolts of heavy metal detoxing, and I always think of Tony Pantalaresco for that. Even when the 5G comes, and maybe I should say, especially when the 5G comes, Tony has a technique to get the nanos out of the system that is absolutely magnetic. And I think that the magnetics, I just was reading a book about tuning forks. and sound. And so we're looking at a type of medicine that we have been disallowed for many years. And doctors who practice it are killed and or marginalized. And now we really need to take a good look at the magnetic wisdom, the sound wisdom, anything that has to do with frequencies, because this is what 5G will use. And I wouldn't believe the when they brought this out, and the I couldn't believe how many articles there were on 5G. It was as though somebody was just pumping out thousands of articles on 5G, and it was not just activists at all. No, they wanted us to read these articles. I think that they're partial lies. One lie I know is that the 4G phone has had phased array antenna in it from the get-go. And phased array antennas are the name of the game for the 5G. That's what makes it, according to Harald Kautz-Vella, who explained it all very thoroughly to me. It's the phased array antenna and the way it works that can really take us by storm. And so we need to study phased array antennas. We need to understand they can be tiny, they can be big, they can be in our neighborhood and big, 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 and then they can be in the phone, tiny.
That's why I sometimes laugh about people talking about the rollout of 5G as well, Ilana. Not only am I in a 5G city right now, but a lot of routers that people's computers are plugged into, they've had a 2G, a 4G, and a 5G option for some time now. So we've been kind of using this. It's not a rollout, it's more the declaration that it's here.
Yes, and that's why, is it here? Is this box it? What will the satellites do, the 20,000 Elon Musk satellites that are purportedly already up there?
And probably you'll have Jeff Bezos, he'll launch another 20,000, because like you said earlier, it's not just SpaceX that's launching things right now. It's all around the world. No. It's a push.
Right. So I know that they're going to go through a huge experimental time. And the reason I'm bringing up consciousness and the unknowns of the power of consciousness is that we really need to think much more cleverly than we have. Basically, the way we've been doing it is just sort of waiting for what comes down the pike from mainstream media to alternative media, and then we have our activists who are talking, but rather than that passive waiting for, we know that that the millimeter wave is going to be used. We know that, and we know that it has to do with DNA because we've watched the millimeter waves now at the TSA airport boundaries for years, and how I went through one just to see what I would experience, and I was breathless, dizzy, and
there's the music. Hold that for 2 seconds. We'll be right back.
This is the Camp Baker Zone.
Yes, it's official. I am truly shameless. For another segment, I've kidnapped our good friend, the brilliant, the wonderful Ilana Freeland. She's here with us. She's having so much fun on the show tonight. She's drawing off the energy of everyone out there that she is going to give us a little bit more of her time. And I know we all appreciate that, Ilana. And you do a lot of speaking, and you can't speak enough, in my opinion, especially about these topics. More and more people have to be made aware of this. It doesn't discriminate all of the stuff that we're talking about tonight. This is set for all of us. And you're going to be on my old sparring partner's new show come Friday. I think you're on with Anthony Patch, right?
Yes, I am.
I think that's Blog Talk Radio.
Don't ask me what time. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think you can get it on. I usually catch it on YouTube as well. So I'll certainly be looking forward to that at the weekend. But not only that, people can actually go and see you speaking in California, I believe.
Yes, I will be in California March 19 and 20. and 23rd. I'll be speaking in Los Angeles. MUFON has invited me, and I will be giving 2 talks to MUFON, Orange County. And then I will be giving a talk to the LA Skywatch, a very activist, wonderful group of people that have hosted me many times.
Absolutely fantastic. Now then, we were talking briefly during the break about Donald Trump before we get into the AI. And we both kind of, I think we're on the same page here. Donald Trump doesn't seem to be the same Donald Trump that we seen when he was running for president. And in recent times, you know, he's been talking very positively about the rollout of 5G, shall we say, to put it mildly. What's your opinion on what's happening there, Ilana? Because it doesn't look good.
No, but, you know, I'm really not sure how many presidents are really who aren't programmed. We've had a few programmed presidents, but that these more wakeful presidents don't seem to be being told what is really going on. It's as though someone on staff is editing what they know and what they don't know, and certainly that would be anything coming from the people or from the alternative media or whatever. I mean, the schedule of the president more and more to me looks like less like a person who's running just about anything in the United States, but who is a photo op and who gives people the feeling that someone is in charge. In the case of Mr. Trump, I have been wondering how much he knows about how sophisticated the remote mind control is. And I decided several months ago that he didn't know much. I know that his wife refused to sleep in the White House, and she had it debugged. And I can only hope that that debugging is something that isn't a one-time affair, but actually is sophisticated and goes on. But it appears to me that that is not the case. Arrogance is its own answer, and certainly this very bright businessman has been arrogant. And I believe he's going to be caught in the maws of these people who have access to this technology, because I know he doesn't. So anyway, those are my thoughts right now.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. Something's gone wrong. I sometimes used to say, you know, maybe he's the greatest actor of all time and he's been a swamp monster all along. But when I look back and I think back, it just doesn't fit right, you know. So I do think somebody's got to him, or like you say, there's something influencing him. And when it comes to, on you go.
Yeah, he's a maverick, which, you know, I like mavericks. But his uncle being John Trump, certainly he was chosen, at least in part because of that. John Trump was a physicist who had access to Tesla's papers as soon as Tesla was dead. So that's very important in choosing a president. I mean, I would say that if a president were really going to run anything in America from here on out, he would have to have a higher degree in physics or astrophysics or something. But that's not the case here. So, but what I wanted to say, you also mentioned about AI.
Yeah.
And yes, AI. To me, I didn't finish my comment about Geordie Rose and, you know, how he talked about the the altar to an alien god. In a way, Geordie is saying something extremely true. You know, I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner.
Yes.
And so I've studied a lot of esoterics, especially esoteric science, which is science that the Jasons, who are a not very well-known group to Americans, but the Jasons, and that is their name, or a Jason group, are the creme de la creme of American scientists, and probably from other countries as well. It's probably not even just American. But these scientists have access to ancient documents, ancient science, the science that quantum physics. I mean, they probably had access to it for 50 years before it was allowed to really expose itself and move in circles that we tend to think are, the PhDs. We tend to think that they've got the keys to the kingdom. Not so. Not so. That's all of grad school is conditioning. So I think that the AI and the relationship it might have with what some people would call the demonic, some people would call alien. I don't think there's much difference between the two of those, other than maybe someone might think that alien comes from somewhere else, some other planet, and demonic comes from this planet. I don't know. But when we have an old law, nature abhors a vacuum. And that's what I think of when I think of the D wave. Jordy also said in one of his videos, promos of the D wave, that it requires intense cold, colder than outer space. Well, that's very cold, and otherwise it won't work. So that coldness makes me think that some entity could enter that. So it is not a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum.
And of course, we're talking
what comes into these computers that is not natural, and yet extremely conscious.
Yeah, we're talking about something out of our space and time. We're talking interdimensional. And it's highly possible, that black cube, nobody can look in it when it's doing its quantum effects. Superposition, something in two places at once. And I think when Jordy's talking about that altar to the alien god, he's actually been more literal than people actually take on board. And, you mentioned the aliens and the demons, and it's kind of my claim to fame. I made a thumbnail for a show I done with Anthony Patch, and he uses that in one of his presentations. And he says there's people on the internet that are talking about how we're summoning demons, and then he gets into Elon Musk. And he says it's not demons, that's absolute rubbish. What it is it's aliens. And I burst out laughing the first time I seen it, because like you, alien, demon, splitting hairs really, isn't it? And he goes on to talk about how
it's just an alien.
Yeah, how these aliens are going to have absolutely none of our best interests at heart. They're going to be so far more superior to us that it's going to be like us and the ant. And he compares them to H.P. Lovecraft's Ancient Ones. And anyone who looks into H.P. Lovecraft, again, demons, aliens, it really doesn't matter at this stage. So I really do think it's some kind of communication device. It really feels like that.
And I think that the splitting of hairs between the terms alien and demons is a moral one. Those who are materialists don't want anything smacking of the moral of evil. They want, aliens can be intelligent, they can be anti-human, but not demonic. It's as though it's like the term plasma that was it's like the term ether that was suddenly forbidden at the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, Einstein was still using the term ether for what now they've tried to call dark matter. He was still using it in the 20s and going into the 30s, and then somehow the curtain came down, and no one was allowed to use that term anymore and be considered seriously by science. Now we find it, like with quantum entanglement, would be something I'm just now really beginning to understand. Quantum entanglement also is it's basically everything's connected.
It's almost like I think that'll be one of the selling points of the kind of human 2.0, that we're psychically connected. We can basically talk to each other remotely.
Well, I think it won't just be a term. I think that they will be quantumly entangling us.
Yeah.
and our thoughts and our minds.
And
And I think that is 5G. That's very much a 5G jurisdiction of the millimeter wave. Very much so.
you see, that's the Internet of
Uh,
Things. I mean, the Internet of Things, you've got the gadgets in your home, you've got the smart dust
Yeah.
on the trees and all the life outside. But we have to really think we're a part of the Internet of Things as well, because we're being networked into exactly the same system.
Yes, because of the nanotech in
Yeah,
us.
we are a
It
thing.
really is.
Yeah, we're one of the things that's on the Internet of Things.
So if you see, and that's important, and we can use Jordy's analogy here of the altar to the alien god, and my nature abhors a vacuum. I mean, here we have this amazing system. We're going to have electric cars supposedly, and everything is speaking to each other, and they're checking each other's energy levels and blah blah blah. But it's really a mechanism. It's not a swarm. It doesn't have its own intelligence, really. 5G is going to be its intelligence. And with the 5G and the intelligence, what will come into that vacuum that nature so abhors? What will fill it? And now we're in the realm of the demonic and the realm of something very alien to us. That various areas may be taken over by various entities. I mean, this if you really look at metaphysics and physics, we are now at the point where they are not that far apart and are in fact overlapping. So those who despise religion, let me tell you something. This is not churchianity. This is not the Roman Church. This is metaphysics. And metaphysics are taken very seriously by metaphysical beings. And then we have physics, but they're now merging. And so we'd better get used to at least the language of the metaphysical. And I'm going to do that in this next synthetic biology book. As I said, they want me. It seems to me that if I'm doing a book on synthetic biology, somebody would like me to just stick with that. But I'm not going to, because it's connected. It's quantumly entangled with all kinds of things that have to do with metaphysics, physics, biology, biophysics, neurology, neurophysics. This is how it is now. And we must be aware of that we cannot stay in the box anymore. We're going to have to take risks. We're going to have to do experiments on our own with our health, with our consciousness, with our environment, and really look at this time we've been born into. To me, it's no accident that all of us are here. Certainly not my accident. I'm thrilled to be here now.
I say that often.
This is an exciting crossover.
The best of times to be here, the most interesting of times, absolutely. And I know it sounds a bit new agey, but I think with so many of us on the planet, it's almost at some level, I think we chose to be here. We knew the stuff was going to be going down.
Oh, when I look back at my biography, which I'm doing more and more the older I get, I see all kinds of clues and breadcrumbs leading me to exactly what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Did I know then?
Well,
I had no idea.
I mentioned the army earlier on, and I worked in satellite communications, and I remember the lesson vividly. And we were being taught how to do over-the-horizon communications to submarines. And they were telling us all about how they could manipulate the atmosphere and that we could bounce our signals if we got it just right, the just right frequency. Now, at the time, I just thought this was super cool, Ilana. And then I find myself listening to Nick Begich later in life, and it dawns on me, wow, I was literally using the technology that now I'm helping to expose. So I'm with you. When you look back, we were always destined to be here, and everyone's got that story.
Everyone has that story, but as long as they negate it, because I don't know why. I mean, it's the most exciting, interesting thing to understand that we are connected to our time.
Yeah.
And we need, even if we don't like what it's doing, and I would imagine there have been many, many people in many times who do not like what their time is doing, such as, the Inquisition. But it is what it is. And so let's get busy. Let's learn. Knowledge is power, scientia est potentia. And remember, I told you, Kev, that my initials are EMF.
Exactly.
What can I say?
Always destined for this. Now, you mentioned time there, and we mentioned how time might be we're perceiving it differently with the nanotechnology merging with us, that kind of thing. Cern, how much do you think Cern plays into everything we've been talking about tonight from Ilana Freeland's point of view?
Oh, it has to. I mean, that's why, Tony has been so valuable to me. And the magnetosphere, the ionosphere, these are metaphysically speaking, these are the subtle bodies of the earth, and they are under assault. And CERN is certainly right up there. It's, as I call it in my Under an Ionized Sky, Chapter 8, or Chapter 10, the Temple of CERN.
Yeah.
It's not just science that they're doing there. They're doing metaphysics there.
And of course, now they're talking about 100-kilometer ring by 2030, 2040, I believe. And at the same time, the Chinese are building exactly the same circumference of ring over there. It makes you wonder just what they've got in store for us then, because things are getting crazy now, Ilana.
Yeah, but imagine, Kev, do they know what they're dealing with? A lot of them don't.
I sometimes wonder, we can take the D-wave in here. I wonder how much of the impetus, this push to build more technology, is coming from an outside source as opposed to just people's ingenuity. What I mean is,
what do you mean?
Are we almost
like what else?
Yeah, are we almost been prompted by, say, like Geordie calls it, the alien, to build the ring bigger, to open up other doors and dimensions? I know it's a bit woo-woo, but I sometimes feel that the information that they're using to build the technology, it's coming from a dark place. It's coming from a place that doesn't seem to have our best intentions at heart. No,
it doesn't. No, but I don't see that that's woo-woo. I mean, it's got to be considered, right? I mean, in the, I can't remember if it's Romans or Galatians, where Paul talks about powers and principalities. It has ever been thus on the earth, that we are dealing with invisibles. I mean, when I was, I think I was 30, I read a remarkable book, and it was by Julian Jayne, a professor at MIT, and it was The Origins of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. And in that book, he posits that this neocortex that we're all enamored of, that there was a time in Homeric Greece, that would be 2,500, 3,000 years ago, we didn't have that relationship with that part of our brain, and it wasn't that well developed. We had much more of a right brain approach to life, and that when Homer is talking about Achilles standing out on the battlefield, conferring with his aegis, Athena, a goddess, about the battle and how it should be conducted, that he was not being metaphoric, that this actually was true, that there was a time when we could see. I mean, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum now, Kev, what do you see? Our visual range is just teeny weeny, and out to each side, all the way to gamma rays, and out to radio waves. I mean, how much can we see what's here?
I often say it's it's a very, very fine slither of the entire spectrum, and that's what sometimes the way I describe our knowledge on physics as well, because you've been taking in the metaphysics tonight, and we think the laws of physics are everything, they're the be-all and end-all, but I think if we were to know everything, we would see that it's just a very small slither, and there's so much more either side of what we know.
Well, yes, it's metaphysics.
Yep.
That's what's on the other side of what we have, and that's where the blessing of being here is. This is exceedingly interesting time to come this close to what has typically been called by esotericists for many thousands of years the threshold or the veil. We are right up against it now. And will these psychopaths that are running these programs push us through? Well, they may, but I don't know. And I'm working as feverishly and hard as I can to wake up as many people as I can and trying to help others who are waking people up too, being their support system. This is not a competition. This is cooperative, because only by awakening can we harness the consciousness that goes unused in most people, unused, and bring something forward that could save the humanity of the future. I do not want this transhumanist thing at all. Absolutely. And I want humanity to be able to come to the earth, work on their things that they need to work on, make their own choices, even if they're bad choices. I do not want an AI directing our nervous systems. And so I work hard, and I invite everyone to join me. This is a noble enterprise.
Yeah.
This is it.
We say on TFR.
There is no more important that I see.
TFR's motto is silence is consent. And we can't be silent when it comes to a topic like this. And, you know, consciousness, sometimes people glaze over and think, oh, here we go, new agey stuff, right? But they want people to think that, because just the other day we were reading a document by the CIA that was talking all about the harnessing of consciousness and how it could be used for X, Y, and Z. And it was like, I think it was a 17-page document, something like that. Nothing new agey in there, nothing at all. In fact,
they've been doing it. That's COINTELPRO.
Yeah.
I lived through the 60s. I know. That's exactly what they were dedicated to. They ran all the cults in America. They mind controlled people. They put bad drugs on the street to get kids into hospitals where they could mind control them. They were totally dedicated to one thing, consciousness. Now tell me that's new agey woo-woo. No, it's the key. It's the key. And to knowledge is power. Yeah.
and you see more and more in the media nowadays, scientists, it's the big thing. What is consciousness? They're trying to map consciousness. They want to upload consciousness. Now, they can get as close a copy of our brainwaves as they like, but I honestly don't think you can upload consciousness. Yes, you could upload upload a copy of your brain, but this is like the holy grail for... Well, I mean...
The brain, yeah, but the brain is the diving board, and I am the diver. And the dive, I may need the brain to make the dive, but the brain does not produce the dive. I do. I produce the dive. And so this idea of consciousness, we know next to nothing about it. And then they've made these rifts between us, between Christian and non-Christian, Muslim and non-Muslim, all these different rifts that we've had for centuries and allowed ourselves to be controlled by. It's the consciousness, whatever the story that one has inherited as to how the consciousness works and who's in charge and all that. This is so exciting that we can really take hold of it and make a defense, because now we know it's all frequency. It's all frequency. And we can choose those frequencies, and we must choose them, because otherwise, if the machinery around us, the infrastructure of the space fence, will have its way with the 5G, they will be intruding on us. And we won't recognize it. We must be able to recognize it. Are you having thoughts that are not your typical thoughts? Are you having emotions that come out of nowhere and are not your emotions? Are you having dreams that seem manufactured? These are real questions now. These are not fantasies or science fiction. We are in that era, and the machinery, I can vouch for it, Kev. It's all set up now. It's all set up. It's all calibrated and is recalibrated when need be. And the 5G is the linchpin. So let's get busy. And not forget.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm sitting here smiling. What a powerful message to end the broadcast. And folks, don't forget, stay on Truth Frequency, all about the frequency. Lucky coming up after the break. But Ilana Freeland, check out her website, ilanafreeland.com. We'll be back tomorrow night, wherever you are. Make it TFR and Dinny touch that dial.